At this place in history, we're in Fairhaven with Steve Perkins, the executive director of the Vermont Historical Society. To be exact, Steve, we're at Veterans Memorial Park, right in the middle of Fairhaven. So what, or perhaps better yet, who brings us here?
Yeah, Mike. So this park really was the brainchild of someone who finished up his life in Fairhaven, and around town everyone knew him as the General. So a quite incredible Vermonter, Edwin Little, and he was born right down the road in North Pulteney. So
Yeah, not too far at all.
now he actually learned how to fly as a young man. So grew up on a farm, like I said, in North Pulteney, and doing some work with some local folks, met a local pilot through trading, was able to get lessons. So he knew how to fly before World War II broke out. And so when it broke out, he was able to enlist in the Army and very quickly was assigned to pilot training and learned how to fly ultimately one of the U.S.'s biggest planes, the B-17, the Flying Fortress.
Yeah, exactly. And there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them in the European theater, particularly.
Yeah, he flew out of England and, very famously flew bombing runs throughout Belgium and all the way into the Ruhr Valley and Germany. And pilots were able to name their own planes.
Yes, they could.
And so he called it the Green Mountain Rambler. And as far as we know, it's the only bomber during World War II named after Vermont. He survived World War II.
Yeah.
Very rare for B-17 pilots and crewmen.
Indeed.
You only had to serve 25 missions and you were done. He did his 25 missions and then transferred back to the U.S., became part of the U.S. Air Force, and then became part of the Berlin Airlift. Very famous logistical feat of keeping a city going right at the beginning of the Cold War. He became involved in logistics and strategic use of heavy aircraft, ended up commanding Air Force bases in Alaska, and he was involved in the development of intercontinental ballistic missiles and the SR-71 spy plane.
The Blackbird, yeah.
Ultimately retiring from the Air Force as a Brigadier General in 1970. And at that point, moved back to Vermont. Lived here in Fairhaven. And like I said, became very famous around town. They called him the General, very generous. And he felt that the Veterans Memorial that they had here was fine, but it needed more. And really wanted to honor all the men and women that served in World War II, Korea, Vietnam. He served through all of those conflicts. And so he helped raise the money. He helped design the park. He designed the plaques, and this park was installed in the 1980s, and to much fanfare. It actually lived to 2004, and he left all of his personal military records to the Vermont Historical Society. So if you want to research this really interesting guy, we have all of his materials.
An Army Air Forces pilot and an Air Force Cold Warrior at this place in history.